Looking at the great door before me, I took a moment to ponder just how often anyone actually came this way. My uncle was a recluse, to put it bluntly, and I had not been to see him since my release from the pit, and I was unsure how this reunion was likely to play out. I had been standing there for a few minutes now, knowing that I should have made this journey long before now, and was now trying to collect my words. As the large portal opened and the tunnel of elemental power beyond calmed from a torrent of destruction to a clear and safe passage, I accepted it was of little consequence, as he had knowledge that I was in dire need of. So I walked forward for some time before crossing another opening and finding myself in a workshop that I had not seen in ages. Its outer shape and dimensions were as I remembered them, but the configurations of shelves, benches, and other miscellany of my uncle's constant crafting and experimentation was far more dense and crowded than I remembered. All neatly ordered in its place, yet there always seemed to be a half-completed project on each of the stations and benches I passed. Of course, in the center of the room, hunched over a machine of some kind, was my uncle. When he turned to greet me, I was stunned for a brief moment as I saw the fleshless form of his skull, and came to realize that he had, in fact, become a lich, and that the rumors were true on this matter. My Uncle Jackson seemed to understand my shock, but was not going to let the moment pass. "Tagalon, son of my brother, eldest and lore master of your house, I welcome you to my home. Please do not allow the changes of my unlife to give you pause. Tell me why you have come. What can this dusty pile of bones do for you?" His wise smile made me chuckle. Uncle Jackson always had been different from most of his contemporaries in his humility. "Simple, Uncle Jackson. I need to learn about Vainson. From someone who can tell me more than chaos and death made flesh, or the like." For but being a skull, it was impressive how the distaste for the subject matter could be read from his face. "I know you were not present during the reign, and understand why you might be curious, but both it and he are long dead and destroyed, and best left in the past. What is your interest in it? Purely academic, or?" He let the rest of the question hang, knowing that there may be more at play than could be discussed directly. "Uncle, you are painfully aware how the past has a habit of finding its way back into the present, and I have reason to believe that there may be forces of work that are..." I considered my words carefully, as Jackson didn't need to be dragged into the details. "Heavily influenced by the long-dead demon in their formation, and I was hoping insight into one would aid in the defeat of the other." Jackson looked at me with his empty eye sockets, and I could feel the scrutiny of his gaze roll over me for a moment before he spoke. "Dag, I shall tell you. But you have to understand, I did not leave this point at any point during the reign. My equipment was only partially reliable in gathering information. So pervasive was the daemon's taint, so disruptive to the natural order his presence was." He motioned to a chair that was walking up to me. "Please, take a seat. I'll brew us some tea. This is going to be a long discussion, and we are only having it once." "Understood?" by the 9 and 4. Welcome back to the library, where today we're going to take another short look at one of the most historically impactful beings in the realms. His summoning, reign, first defeat and sealing, and eventual destruction in the closing years of the Age of Valor by the same named great gathering of mortal heroes turned gods set the ground for all that has come since, and a bit of what has come before as well. Of course, I can only be speaking of the great Daemon Vainson himself, the doom of both Analar and Dragon, and the direct cause for the vanishing of the home realm, and the chaos that occurred in the scattered colonies in the wake of its loss. As I am in no doubt that you are aware, this is just going to be a brief overview of this pivotal character in the history and shaping of Jam'mar, her heroes, and history. That said, let us begin with a simple question. What was Vainson? And immediately we run into a problem, as despite the multitudes of accounts on the matter that do exist, very few agree on any point of description, save one, that he was a dragon of some form or another. Thus, the shame for the ruination of Jam'mar and all the torment that followed has, for most of history, been laid at the dragon's claws. However, it had been discovered in later ages that the creature known as Vainson was not in fact a dragon in any known form. Instead, it is proposed that he was a being of pure chaos, and that observers of him would see that which they most feared or revered, with dragons being commonly held in this perception, eventually becoming how all saw him by dissemination of the tales, drawings, and other form of news that would have made its way around the world. So he only appeared as a dragon, and as such, information became more commonly accepted and known across the realms. It has surprisingly well been accepted as truth. So, having some sort of answer as to what he was, let us ask the next reasonable question. Why and how did the Analar summon him? And where from? As to the how, only the Darkwa Council, those Analar actually that performed the act, know the details. However, the where was recorded as the following. From the place that is between his, the Nine Wings, dominion and will, and that of the eldest four, outside the scripts of ink and quill, and from beyond the eldest door. This seems to indicate that it was less a place of matter and reality, and more a conceptual locale. Not exactly uncommon for such esoteric tasks as summoning something so alien to reality. The reason for trying such a wild play as this was simple. The Darkwa were sure and convinced all the right people that this would end the war, bring the dragons to heel, and ensure stability for years beyond counting. Why did they think he would bring the dragons to heel? Because in all materials from the research, as well as all known accounts of the Darkwa speaking on the matter, of which there are few, Vainson presented himself as the banished child of two of the dragon gods, Halord and Amia. Banished as the Union purportedly had created a child so mighty that it was sealed away as an egg, to prevent Vainson from taking his place as the mightiest of his kind. He made promises of peace, and that those dragons that were currently warring against the Analar would be made to serve, as just a token of his gratitude, with far more to be had. Furthermore, the Second War of Feather and Scale was beginning to escalate wildly, with the outright destruction of Jam'mar looking more and more likely, as both sides continued to ramp up their power and weapons in an attempt to beat the other into submission. without drastic action taken soon, there would be nothing left for any potential winner to rule. Thus, Thanix, Lord Protector of the NLR, approved the Dark Wah's plan to find the quickest end to the conflict that allowed the creation of the Nine Wings to survive, as well as bringing the dragons to defeat. Deep in the Temple of the Dark Wah, known as the Arcanum Archive, they worked for 36 days and 36 nights before the ritual was complete and the war was brought to its sudden and irrefutable end. First indication of something being horribly wrong was the entire home system being sealed off from the rest of space and the colonies that they contained. One day, the star of Credelis just vanished from the sky for all those outside the system. Next, most, if not all, dragons with even a shred of chaos or discontent at the current way of things in their hearts, as well as nearly all the NLR on Jam'mar still, were instantly pulled into Vainson's thrall and service. This gave Vainson a terrible force, made up of the Elders, and he turned this onto Jam'mar and her people. He is thought to have first destroyed Domnitra and shattered the line of kings when he attacked their capital, leaving it and everything for hundreds of miles covered in a forest of monsters and other dangers. The fact that this is one of the first actions taken, as well as certain other interesting notes, such as his efforts and success in the destruction, at least for ages, of the Necrotai, seemed to indicate he had some fear or concern regarding the power of the blue flame. Of course, this is only conjecture, but the fact that the secrets and power of the flame were for all practical purposes lost to the realms until well after the Age of Valor and the final defeat of Vainson seems to lead credence to this theory, in my own humble opinion. Many of his failed attacks on the mostly abandoned capital of the Elves, Avlin, proved that despite the power the daemon had at his disposal, he was not irresistible or unbeatable. Likewise, the dwarves were able to use their deep and mighty strongholds and advanced magics to both hide the exact location of their homes, as well as construct a means to siphon away great portions of the daemon's power to be neutralized, although this would take a great many years to see the results of, as mighty as the demon was great, and the siphon was designed to work slowly enough to go unnoticed, eventually setting the stage for his defeat at the hands of the great three heroes. The city of Polaron saw dozens of attacks, with great portions of the city razed or otherwise destroyed with each. However, Vainson never finished the job, seeming to grow bored after slaying whatever champions or new tricks the residents had come up with, and just leaving, allowing the city to rebuild, learn, and prepare for the next attack. The Isle of Mist is perhaps the only place not to suffer under constant attack, as Vainson was well aware of the power of that artificial island of the Analar's making, and thus only sent his disfavored troops to try to crush the Necrotai and Dragwa. They succeeded only partially, as the Necrotai seemed to implode, and the Dragwa drew themselves behind their walls to bleed out and destroy what forces would try to attack the home city. However, it could easily be argued that the only reason that any of the above mentioned places withstood Vainson's attacks is his very nature: chaos. Often it was recorded he would grow bored and leave a battle, and normally the might of his forces would be able to finish the job with little problem. But in cases where it was only due to the presence of Vainson himself that the battle was even possible, such as with some of the above-mentioned locations, his sudden departure could see an entire army destroyed and routed, and did see so. Not that Vainson cared, for he could bring back those he wished from death. So great was his perversion of even normally inviolate states, such as life and death. This pattern of battles and the struggle to survive continued for well into the multiple centuries range, and due to the daemon's ability to move about in the flows of time in some unknown manner, it may never be known the exact amount of time that it lasted, as all between his summoning and his first defeat at the hands of the three is a self-contained yet ever-shifting amount of time and misery. But his defeat did come, and with it the end of his reign. The majority of the world had been rocked into a near primitive state, with it taking many years and the vast production of many states and nations to begin the return to things of a semblance of their pre-reign state. The exact events of the reign are not known to many, with records sealed and locked away, in fear that they might hold some means of bringing Vainson back, some ancient trap or fail-safe laid by the daemon. This is not an unfounded fear, as it is known that Vainson has attempted such methods in the past. However, since the discovery of the Expeditus Primus and the beginning of the Age of Stars, it has been the official position of Her Majesty Genevieve, Empress of the Gods, that such fears were no longer necessary, and with the daemon's last avatar being destroyed on board the Primus, the threat of Vainson had truly ended for the realms. And this is where we find ourselves today, with Vainson but a painful relic of a long-dead past, while being the impetus to so much of the growth of the realms and the might that they carry with them. If not for the years of terror of his reign, or of the many battles needed to eventually end the threat, the realms would not have the mighty gods that it does, nor the mighty and equally hardy people themselves. With this brief look of Vainson at its close, I hope you have a better appreciation for the formative place he holds within the history and tales of the realms. Now, before we end this entry, I want to thank you for sticking with me and continuing to learn about the realms, my perceptive patrons. Thank you. Until you next find your way back to the library for another entry. By the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other.